Hi, you guys. Welcome back. My name is Carrie Penny. I am the Happy Crafty Homemaker, and today is, I guess, what we're calling Crafty Chat number 2. How to wisely build a yarn stash or craft stash. So this isn't just limited to yarn. How to do it wisely if you're inclined to stash craft supplies. So most of these are hard-learned lessons from personal experience. I want to put that kind of out there in general, right off the bat. There have been a lot of growing pains. I have been a solo crafter for the majority of my life. I didn't meet other knitters and crocheters in person until about 8 years ago. But I've been crocheting for over 30 years, and I've been knitting for 12, 14 years, somewhere in there. So I've spent most of my crafty life being a solo crafter, and I'm still more or less a solo paper crafter, just, per shawl ministries and things like that. I've been able to branch out and actually meet people in person who also do yarny crafts. So I made a lot of mistakes in building my stashes over the years and not thinking through my process and knowing what I was doing. So my first tip is take it slow, especially if you're new to a craft. Take it very slow. Buying supplies, not for a project. Really find out what it is that you want to use, like to use, what things are you looking for in a supply or a product. Really take that time to kind of start maturing into the craft. So there are two things that can happen when you first start that can derail you very quickly. One is thinking you have to have a hoard. And you don't. That especially when you're just starting out. I mean, this did not grow overnight. This is 16 years of stashing. Everything in here is since I got married now. My early stash was, before I got married. But I have used most of that. But all of this is 16 years, which is 50% of the time I've been crocheting. Also, when you just start out, the excitement can override things. It's not just that you're supposed to have it. Let's buy. It's the excitement of it. I want to try this. 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 And you end up duplicating things that you may or may not actually like. But if you take time to mature into what you're doing and mature into crafting a little bit, you will know, like, I don't like cotton. I don't like roving. I love a tight, twisted, worsted weight yarn, or I love working with wool. I hate working with. So give yourself that time to experience project by project, yarn by yarn, to figure out what it is you really do like. Now, with that having been said, as we craft for many years, our tastes change. So don't worry about so much, down the road, I might not like this yarn anymore. Or down the road, I might not really love this color anymore, as much as ensuring that the quality of the yarn is what you want, what you expect, and you're going to enjoy working with the yarn itself in general. The down the road thinking, it took me a long time to work like Caron Simply Soft back out of my stash. I don't have any Caron Simply Soft in my stash anymore, except for like scraps here and there. And this goes on to another point as well. With the FOMO, the fear of missing out. When I started crocheting and actually buying my, like, not just inheriting supplies from my grandmother and stuff, but actually spending my money on craft supplies or asking for yarn as a birthday gift or a Christmas gift, Simply Soft was one of the things I really enjoyed working with because it was the softest yarn on the market at the time. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't love Simply Soft. It's a great yarn. It's a mainstay staple yarn for a lot of people. It's personally not my go-to yarn. I don't stash it. If I need it for a project, I buy it for that project, but I don't stash it. Even if I find it at 25 cents a ball, I know better than to put that in my stash because I'm never going to reach for it. I started off loving it. And when I was younger, I actually worked at a Michael's for a while. And when we got the clearancing things, I'd buy up a whole bunch of it on clearance and use it for a rainy day project or use it as inspiration. That was like my early stash building, was Simply Soft specifically. Over time, though, other yarn companies started bringing out more and more lines that I liked better. They better suited my needs. They better suited my taste. So I found it hard to continue working through the Simply Soft. I specifically had to focus on getting that back out of my stash. No different than with my 2021 goals. I mentioned I really want to use the Impeccable and the Red Heart out of my stash because I don't reach for those as much. I have more than enough to do what I would want to do, and I would like to have those down to, if I need it for a project, I'll just go buy what I need, not having a stash of Red Heart Super Saver and Loops and Thread Impeccable taking up cube space in my room perpetually. But I went from Simply Soft to Lion brand Vanna's Choice. Love it. I still have a lot of it. I've got 2.5 cubes still full of Vanna's Choice. It's a great yarn. It's super soft. It's twisted in a way I prefer yarn to be twisted. It doesn't pill as much. It stays squishy. And then a few years after I discovered that, I discovered Premier Anti-Pilling, which, if you've watched my channel for any length of time, I am constantly extolling my preference for Premier Anti-Pilling as my go-to acrylic worsted weight yarn. I like the feel of it. It's very, very soft. It doesn't squeak on my hooks and needles. It has great stitch definition for the things that I do. It holds up in the wash like nobody's business. I have a blanket that's many, many moons old, and it still looks like new pretty much. So this is my go-to acrylic worsted weight yarn now. Now, I still have a substantial stash of, this is where my Vanna's Choice is right here. I do have a substantial stash of Vanna's Choice still. I still go to this yarn a lot. I still use this yarn a lot. But if I'm stashing, if I'm buying for the purpose of putting it on my yarn wall and holding it for a rainy day, I tend to buy the anti-pilling now. So like, don't worry so much about that development and growth, because you will eventually, realize, okay, let's pull back here and stop buying so much of this one. It's part of it's intuitive, part of it is growth as a crafter. This is why I keep things on display though. If I see something that stays here for too long and I never use any of it, or never think to use any of it, or don't want to use any of it, I know that's what I need to focus on getting out of my stash. I either need to gift it, make something with it, or sell it. It needs to not be in my stash anymore. There are certain things, I've got obviously a substantial stash of the hot pink here. Bought it on clearance. I know I love the yarn, love the color, but I knew yellow was not going to be the one I went to as often. I knew green wasn't going to be what I went to as often. I do also have the electric blue and some of the purple left, but I knew this was something I would go to a lot. I liked this, but it wasn't going to be something I went to all the time. So I bought almost a sweater's quantity of this, the blue and the purple. I bought, amigurumi accent quantities of the green and the yellow, because I knew those, while I would use them, weren't things I was going to use all the time. So that brings me up to my next point. When you are at the point, I love this yarn. I want to make all the things in this yarn. I need this yarn. we're at the point we have a good sale on the yarn, how do you know how much to buy? This is how I do it. And this yarn is a perfect example. This is why I kept my camera over here today to film this. I love this color. This is a color I frequently wear in things like cardigans and shrugs or shawls. I was thinking when I bought this yarn, this would make a great cardigan. I wanted like a boyfriend cardigan, big oversized, squishy, big stitch, cozy cardigan. And that's what I bought this for. So I bought a sweater's quantity of this yarn. But I've since decided what I really want to do with it is I want to make a specific shawl with it. So I bought the sweater's quantity. I'm not going to use all of it in the shawl, obviously. But I'm going to have leftovers. Now for me, I'm going to have about 50% of this left over when I finish my shawl with it. I will leave it on the wall and come back to it eventually. I love the color. This is Lion Brand Heartland. I love the color. I like the texture. It is, for me, it is kind of a specialty yarn. It does split a little bit. It is a little bit more, you need to be a little bit slower while working with it. So it's not something I'm going to, this is the only Heartland I own. The other things in here are, woolies. So, I know this is a yarn I like. I don't love it, but I do like it. I like the finished garment. It's fine to work with. I just have to be careful with it. So I've never stashed any other amounts of it. I stashed the amount for the largest project I thought I might do with it, which was a sweater. I wasn't going to do a blanket with it or anything else. So I did buy a sweater's quantity, knowing if I change my mind, I'm going to have leftovers to come back to at some point. I may find, a cowl or another shawl pattern or something like that to do with my leftovers. But I will leave this on the wall and not worry about the whole ball leftovers from this set. So I think the easiest way, if you're stash building, you've got your perfect sale. I think anything above 60% off is a stash building sale. 50% off is right there on the line. If you know you're going to be doing a project with it this year, 50% off is fine to buy up. If you're stashing it for a rainy day or holding on to it for tomorrow's projects, I really think the time to do that is about 60% off. For me, that's my budget. Most of my stuff that I have in bulk that isn't tied to a project in mind, I bought at 60% off or more. A lot of it I bought at 75% off or more. But so you have to look at this yarn, spend some time thinking about it, hold it, really think about it. And, is this something I would make a blanket out of? No, I might use it with something else in a blanket. So maybe I need 5 balls instead of 20 balls. Is this something I would make a sweater with? Okay, well, I probably need 10 balls of that. If I would make a sweater out of this, I might need 10 balls. Is this something I only want a hat or scarf out of? I only need 2 or 3 balls at that point. This is the self-pulling yarn, also part of the Premier Anti-Pilling line. And I figured the best I was going to do with that was a scarf. That's the only ball of it I have. I have 1 ball. And I bought it 50% off. These were clearance. These were FOMO purchases. Fear of missing out. And I love them. I will definitely be using something. I'm thinking some kind of sweater with these 2 colors in particular. This is the Marley Bird Chic Sheep. I got it for $2.57. It's 100% wool. It was originally $10. It's something I knew I would use, but I had no project in mind. But they didn't have huge quantities in the clearance bin, so I did just buy what was there. So I've got 30 years of experience being able to navigate how I think I'm going to use something. And this is part of that, let yourself mature into the craft before you start going bonkers on things, because you always want to have supplies that you can use on hand. Start prepping for your next project, or I want to do this year. That's fine. It's the I don't have a pattern associated to it, and I don't have a plan associated to it. How much do I buy? What am I going to be storing? Where am I going to be storing it? These are all things you have to kind of think about as you're buying the yarn. Otherwise, you'll have something that sits in your stash for many years and starts weighing you down. You'll be depressed. Oh my God, I spent, $70 on this yarn, and I don't know what to do with it. I'm not inspired to work with it. It's been sitting there for 10 years. I feel like I just wasted. It's the sunk cost fallacy in finance. And you start to feel guilty. That starts holding you back. That starts pulling you away from the happiness, the joy, the creativity. And your stash should not ever start to give you that feeling. If it does, it's time to reassess what you want, what you're using, and what you want to do with what you're not using. So like this year, let's backtrack. We moved in 2019. As we were preparing for the move, I obviously had to pack up everything in my craft room. So as I went through the yarn, I boxed every skein by hand, individually, in an organized fashion. And what that did for me is it made me look at it, assess it, and think, do I really want to move this? If not, I donated some. I gifted some to friends who I knew would use it. I also sold some on Facebook Marketplace. There's nothing wrong with that. When you don't hold on to something you hate. Don't let it become that dark corner of your craft room. Phasing out of a yarn is wonderful. You're growing as a crafter. You're finding new loves. You're moving forward. But if you can't make yourself finish using that yarn with joy, not just, I'm going to meet this project, and filling that project with hate. Don't want that. If you can't find a way to use that yarn joyfully, it's time to rehome it. And there's so many different ways to rehome it. It's fine to have to rehome yarn. Sometimes, you'll break up a set where your project is exactly what you wanted it to be, but you really don't know what to do with the leftovers. Didn't like the yarn as much as you thought you would, things like that. Maybe those leftovers need to be a gift. Maybe those leftovers need to go to, Facebook Marketplace, sell them off. Maybe those leftovers need to just be donated where somebody can get better use out of it. And if you do donate to a charity and you still feel kind of like guilty, remind yourself you're bringing another crafter joy with that. And now you know it's going to get used. So there's a recipient of a finished object out there who also is going to be brought joy. So you didn't just bring joy to one person. You brought joy to 2 new people when you donated that yarn to another person who could use it and make good use out of it. It's an accomplishment to share. An accomplishment to share. Great deals versus good deals. Now, this is going to take your personal finance intuition. For me, a great deal is 60% off plus. A really great deal is 75% off plus. I have a lot of yarns that I have gotten 75% off or more. The Hobby Lobby sale, starts at 70% off now. Michael's used to do a great sale where their clearance stickers were colored by season. And after 2 seasons had passed, you would start getting coupons that gave you an extra percentage off 2 season ago's clearance stuff just to really push that stuff out. So I got a lot of, single balls of Lion Brand Jamie when they clearanced out the big balls of Jamie. Not the little ones, but the big ones. I did that with Pounds of Love when they changed the shade of baby pink. They went from soft baby pink that was barely not white to a more rich baby pink. I got that original color that, you know, $10 a ball, $10 a skein. I got those for like $1 each. Way back when in the day, and y'all have heard me talk about this in the past. And this is funny because this has come up a couple of times. So, my Joann's clearanced out a yarn I had never tried. And I bought a whole bunch of it when it was on clearance at 97 cents. This is Sheepish. This one is Bernat Sheepish Stripes Vicky Howell collection. This was bought at Joann's on clearance, 97 cents. I discovered I loved this yarn. I adored this yarn. I love the way it works. That's what this cube is here. This entire cube is nothing but sheepish in different colors. So after I discovered I loved it, obviously it had been completely clearanced out when I discovered it. I happened to find a sale on the spinrightfactory.com back when they used to sell online. And they had it for 25 cents a ball. You had to buy like a 3-pack or a 6-pack or a 9-pack or something. But I bought some of every color and I bought a lot of it. To the point, here we are 6 years later and I still have an entire cube of it. But like this one was from 2014. And the ones I bought off their thing is actually Karen Sheepish. So this is from 2011. So I got even the older ones. They're very, very similar. They're very similar in texture and feel. They're the same yarn content and everything. I had not caught the fact when I bought this that one is Karen and one is Bernat. Both companies are owned by Spinrite or Yarnspiration. So, but I've been slow to use this. I love this yarn. It's not something I use for everything every day. It is a roving style yarn, so it is more for like delicate projects, but it does have a lot of acrylic content, which makes it hold up a little bit better. But I bought colors that I knew I'd use. I mean, I've got aqua, I've got navy, I've got taupe, I've got a brick red shade that looks amazing with the taupe. I've got olive green, I've got chartreuse. This is the 2 colors of pink I have left, but there was a hot pink that was kind of like this shade. I used all that. I used a couple of the variegateds up now, but I'm slowly working my way through that. It's not for every project. I'm still in love with it. I've had it for many years now, and I'm still in love with it. There's no guilt in having that. I am spending money in space to store. There is, a cost associated to storing things, even in your own home. You have to have the space to store it and stuff. But I still love it. And I still have zero guilt. I bought it at 25 cents a ball. After I knew I loved it, though. After I knew I loved the yarn, I bought tons of it. I mean, when I originally got that, it probably would have filled 4 cubes. I've used a lot of it over the I already talked about learning your likes and building your stash around those. I already told you the story about, the Karen Simply Soft, the Vannas, and the Antipodean. I've actually got, I wrote out a couple of notes so I didn't go too far off in tangent land. Crafting for your largest project or buying for the largest project. It's okay to break it up. I actually did pretty well, y'all. It's okay to grow out of a preference. Yep, got that. Okay, so with something like this being out on display, it makes this part a lot easier for me. But this isn't the storage for everybody. Store your yarn based on your own needs and own wants. When I say this, don't feel like, oh, well, that means I have to put my yarn on display. You absolutely do not have to do that. But being aware of what's in your stash when you do start building one, and being conscientious of not gravitating towards a certain yarn. Like I said with the Caron Simply Soft, it was really obvious. I had a new love for acrylic yarn, soft acrylic yarn. But if I hadn't had a new love just come in, I would have continued to buy Caron Simply Soft. Even, you know, regardless of the sale price, if you're not going to use it, it's not worth you buying. If this is just something you're never going to use for a project, you're never going to reach for it. With me having my yarn on display like this, and in particular grouped inside, like I've got it, mine personally is organized by yarn weight on this wall. All my cakes are the bookcases that are on the other side of the room. I go fingering on this side all the way down to bulky and super bulky. And if I have a lot of a certain kind of yarn, like all of this is Premier Anti-Pilling, all of this is Caron and Bernat Sheepish, all of this is Vanna's Choice. This is all Lion brand yarn, mostly the Heartland, but I do have the start of some Woolies here. This is all Sheepish. I will group those together. So it is really obvious as I'm working through, in particular my big box yarn, not my fancy hand dyeds and stuff, what I'm actually going through, what I'm actually using. Over the last year, the Premier Anti-Pilling Cube went from 4 to 2. I just haven't replenished anything in these as I've gone. I haven't seen, like, you know, the super duper sales. And I can get it regularly at a fairly decent deal, so I haven't replenished in my stash what I have. But if this like sat here and I didn't touch it at all for a year, and I just wasn't drawn to it, I wasn't working with it, I wasn't seeing it, I would know, don't buy anymore. Just don't buy anymore. So having it on display, I can see, you know, like I'm not using a lot of my DK weight yarns. I'm not using a lot of my bulky weight yarns. I can then go and think, okay, is it because I don't like them? Is it because I just haven't seen a project for them? Am I not gravitating towards them because of, you know, color or texture, weight? Am I, you know, is it too hot or too cold to use something? And if you see something just hanging out in your stash like that, take a moment to really think about, you know, why am I not using that yarn? Why is that yarn not calling to me? Especially if you have a huge amount of a certain kind of yarn, taking that time to really think, is it because am I not using it because I have the wrong colors? Am I not using it because I don't like it anymore? Do I have a new love that is surpassing it? And, you know, if you're never going to go for it, once again, donate it, destash it, sell it. If you still love the yarn, you know, like my Sheepish over here, that's okay. You probably don't need to stash any more of it, but it's okay to keep it in your stash. If you don't love it anymore and you just don't want to work with it, I mean, kind of how I feel about kitchen cotton, my passion is not in the cotton itself. I'm working through mine slowly yet surely. But for you, it might just be I don't want it. Take it, sell it, divest. Move it from your stash. Don't let it start weighing you down and hanging out. I've got certain yarns like Knit Picks Felici. I love Felici. I use Felici quite a bit. I probably buy it faster than I use it. It is fingering weight yarn. It is slower to use. Man, I'm trying to get my little tail tucked in there so it's not flipping around. But I know I've got colors that have just sat in my stash for a long time. But I was able to look at it and go, why is this sitting in my stash? Well, the reason it's sitting in my stash is it's just slower to work with. I'm slower to move through it. All right. So if I love a color, when Knit Picks launches the new color series for the season, they do 2 launches, I think, one in the spring and one in the fall. I know I probably only need to buy the colors I really love. I don't need to buy the whole season's collection necessarily. I also look at this and think, is this going to be a pair of socks or is it going to be a hat? These will probably be socks and this would probably be a hat. But yeah, I mean, so I do have like, 2 of certain colors. I do have 4 of one color. And I'll allow myself to continue buying the ones I really love, even though they're moving slower through my stash, because it's not a dislike thing. It's a time problem. I'm slow to use it because it takes longer to work, and that's fine. That for me, I allow myself to continue buying it. For you, that might not be the right choice, but that's something to keep in mind when things aren't moving through your stash as fast as you're buying them. Is there a problem or not? That's a case where it sticks around for a long time, but I don't have a problem with it. The Karen Simply Soft just wasn't moving because I didn't like it. I wasn't working it. I had a new favorite and I wanted to get on to the new things. Another, and this is another, it's super personal to you and your space. And this ties into if you're slowing down using a yarn, it might be time to look at your storage and how you're storing yarns and how you pick yarns for projects. And for me, I like looking at everything out in the open. I can see everything as it moves through my stash. Not everybody can do this and not everybody wants to do this. Make sure that your organization is keeping your stash visible to you, because if you hide something from yourself, it's in the deep dark recesses, it's not properly labeled, you hide it in a bag and stick it under your bed and never think to go check that part of your stash, you're never going to use that yarn because you don't see it. You don't know it's there. You're not thinking about it. It's not present in your process. It's not present. So keep that in mind too when you're picking your organization and picking your storage and buying things. Try not to duplicate things that you've just hidden from yourself. Keeping things sorted for your own preference on that one. This ties into my last craft chat, but think about how you craft. Think about how you're inspired to craft. Think about your process as a crafter. Once again, not everybody's going to have a hoard of yarn. Having a huge stash. I mean, this is my dragon's hoard. This is my collection here. Seeing it out on display and everything is inspiring to me. I look at the yarn and the yarn tells me what it wants to be that day. Not me picking a pattern and demanding that yarn turn into something. But not everybody crafts like I do. I mentioned in the yarn shaming video, if your process is pattern driven, stashing might not be the option for you to begin with. You might need to buy by project. And there's nothing at all wrong about that. Once again, don't let FOMO derail your crafting process. If you're a combination process person where you're pattern driven and supply driven, that's fantastic. You know your process better than I do. I can only speak to my own process with experience and authority. So keep that in mind when you set up your organization, when you set up your storage. Consider how big, how small, what you want to focus on, how do you want it displayed or not displayed. Really set that up for you. Over time, with moves, people moving in and out of your house, that might change. Change is fine, but don't let yourself grow out of what works best for you. Don't limit yourself under what works best for you. Really think about how, then this is part of that. Once again, tip number 1, allow yourself to mature into the craft. Allow yourself to gain experience. Because so many of these things are going to be personal based on how you craft. But really build your stash around your process and how you are inspired to create and make. Don't let somebody else intimidate you one way or the other for how your process works for you. This is a hard one, and I fall into this pitfall, and I have watched people do it more spectacularly than I did. This is for newbie stashers and us seasoned stashers. When you see a new yarn, buy for 1 or 2 projects. Decide, oh, okay, I'm going to just, I'm going to make a hat and a cowl with this and see how this works out. That's how I do like my yarn reviews. I try to do like a hat. I buy enough to knit a hat and crochet a hat, or knit a hat and cowl set, crochet a hat and cowl set. When it's a new to you yarn, I would highly recommend just buying enough to test it out, 1 or 2 items. Don't hoard it. Just, even if you find it at that super special great deal, unless you can tell this is something you're going to like. Like, I knew I liked cupcake because I liked mandala. I knew I liked Woolies cakes in the DK because I do like DK yarn, and I love the Woolies yarn. If you don't have a direct comparison to this yarn, either by touch, by color, by texture, by fiber content, nice quality pictures online where you can see up close the twist, the ply, things like that, limit your purchases. My first purchase from Ice Yarn was a package of Ice Baby, or Ice Magic Baby, a couple of other of their specialty yarns just to see what the quality was like. And I ordered a couple, I got some cottons, I think, in that order, where I was trying to see, like, did I like their quality of cotton better for things like dishcloths? Because I do love making dishcloths. I just don't like working with kitchen cotton. So I got a little bit of a couple of different lines. My order was very, very small. It fit in like a standard little mailer, small mailer for them. On the other hand, one of the ladies in my crochet group, one of the crochet groups on Facebook, she bought 4 cartons of Ice Magic Baby because it was such a great deal and the colors were so phenomenal. And about 2 years later, I saw her complaining about not knowing what to do with it because she didn't like it. And I mean, she spent probably $1,000 on what she ordered. So allow yourself to develop knowledge. What happened with the lady who bought all the Ice Magic Baby is this is at the height of the Sophie Universe blanket. Everybody was wanting to make the Sophie's Universe, and everybody in this group in particular was making it out of Ice Magic Baby. And the colors are stunning in that line. It's a beautiful color line. It's very similar, if you haven't used that, but I have used Lion Brand ice cream yarn. The texture is very similar. It's got this whipped, soft, fluffy texture. It's not like, the anti-pilling or things like that. It's got a different tooth and texture to it. I personally really enjoyed using it, but she got so caught up in seeing what other people were buying and other people were ordering. She overbought just to discover she didn't like the yarn, because the colors are great. They come in amazing color palettes, and there's a huge variety of which you can get that yarn in. And she got so caught up in that and seeing other people's stuff, she didn't purchase for herself. She purchased for other people. She did end up selling a whole bunch of it off. She eventually shared a link, and she got her money's back out of it at that point, I think. But, if you're trying something new to you, especially if you're ordering online, just order enough, look at the yardage, order enough for a small project, and give yourself the chance to taste it before you buy an entire banquet. Not even an entree, an entire banquet of it. And that's a trial and error thing. I've done it too. I've done it a couple of times with a couple of different yarn lines where it's magic to look at it. You want to love it. You want another thing I've seen a lot of people do this with is the Bernat blanket yarn. Now, many ages ago, chenille yarn was a big thing, and it was the velour chenille and then just chenille. Now we have the blanket yarn, which is a chenille yarn. But they're branding it differently. It's polyester instead of, cotton and velour and things like that. There are some differences in the newer ones, but still, like, I bought a whole bunch of chenille yarns on clearance back in the day. I knew from experience when Bernat blanket came out, I was not a fan of chenille yarns. There's some chenille style yarns I do like, but that densely packed, just not a fan of it. Personal preference, nothing wrong with it. If you love that yarn, fantastic. It's a nice yarn. It's well made. It does its thing properly. I do have some from where I was making like lumps of coal and stuff. I can speak to the quality of Bernat blanket yarn. I did not buy it when it went on clearance. I had one girlfriend who was like just shocked because our Michaels at one point had it down to the big balls for like $2. And she's like, aren't you going to go get some? And it's like, I don't like that kind of yarn. No. And she bought like 2 like giant totes full of it. Now she uses it. She loves it. To her, this is like one of the greatest yarns ever. She loves making things out of this. She does a lot of wraps and lap gans out of it. It works for her perfectly. My experience with that yarn, though, is I don't enjoy working with it. So she bought it up when that stuff launched. I didn't buy it on clearance, and I really didn't buy a whole lot of it. Like I said, I bought some gray, and unfortunately I could only get it in the 2-pack, so I do have a whole. And it'll sit there for a while until I make some more lumps of coal or something. But, knowing yourself and knowing whether or not you like something is a very important part to how to wisely build your stash so you will use it and not just see it as disappointing. You'll see the inspiration, not the disappointment. The last thing I have on my list here, and we're now, once again, this is a huge long video. I don't like getting over half an hour, and we're already at 45 minutes. The other thing to think about and consider when you're purchasing yarn for your stash, when you're just stash building, and that's what this whole video is about, is stash building, not by projects, stashing, storing and stashing. When you come across that deal and you're, walking through Joann's and they're getting rid of an entire line and they've got it marked down at 80% off, and all of it. You like the texture, you like the yarn, the colors are phenomenal. The next thing to consider is how this fits into your organization. Now, if you don't have a hole in your yarn wall that fits it, that's fine. I do have some overflow in another part of my house. It's just, project kits and things like that just, they don't fit nicely in my wall storage. If you come across that special sale, though, and you literally cannot think of a single place you're going to fit this into your storage and organization where you can see it and use it, you will know to go to this spot to use this yarn, and you don't have any plans that are going to clear out holes, you might want to consider passing on the sale. Because once again, if you spend the money on the yarn, even at a really, really good deal, if you never, ever use any of it, are you getting your money's value out of it at that point? Growing out of a yarn is one thing. You did get some of your money's worth out of that. You did get value back out of that. But if you can never use that yarn because you hide it from yourself, you don't have a way to store it effectively in your space, you don't have a way to make sure you know to see it and look at it, is that an effective way of spending your money on yarn? And I really hate to say that in that term, but if you know it's never going to be used and you're going to hide it away from yourself and never see it. Now, there are people, once again, how we store our yarn is 100% personal to us. I do have projects set up upstairs where I know eventually I want to use this year. I have project bags or kits that I've ordered over the years that are stored in a separate closet for my yarn room. I have my yarn wall where all my individual skeins, styles, and everything are on display. Even within my own organization system, I have different forms of organization, but all of them are places I go when I want to work on something. If you can't think of a place within your personal organization system where you're going to go see this yarn, or you're going to go look at this yarn, or you can gain inspiration from this yarn, consider before you buy that. I, in the past, have run into the problem where, that's a bad choice. And I don't think I can get any of the other ones out. I do have the cube inserts for a lot of these. A couple of them in there are not regretful purchases. I don't regret having made them, but they are things that when I purchased them, I was in love with. I still really like them quite a bit, but they didn't fit within my storage, and they don't fit within my storage even now. So I have a hard time seeing them to think to use them because they don't fit my process and they don't fit my storage. So I don't see them. My process involves being able to see things, and if I can't see it, I'm not going to use it. And this is a case where I'm just not going to use it because I can't see it until I figure out how to better sort these things to make them visible. Now I do, that is still something that I'm dealing with and purging out of my stash because these are yarns I still like. I have not gotten rid of them, but I can tell you from experience, if the yarn doesn't fit into your organization and you're not going to be able to see it to make it part of your process of inspiration, shopping your stash, however you use your yarn stash, you might want to reconsider making that purchase, even if it is an amazing deal. Because even if you buy it at a super cheap price, that's still now unused, never going to get used. Now, if you have a way, if you think, okay, I don't have a place on my wall right now, but I've got that other big project, I'm going to put these up and maybe we'll just have to do a dedicated space for flat balls of yarn. I mean, a prime example, I've got a bunch of Knit Picks palette yarn. I love this yarn. It is beautiful. I have an amazing array of colors. I bought them on the clearance sale. Unfortunately, I have to store them in a bin because they don't fit my storage. There's no way for me to store them without them getting kind of manky and destroyed. And I feel horrible because I never think to use that yarn because I don't see it. My process is seeing it, touching it, making. And because it's in a cube, out of sight, out of mind. I don't think about its existence in my stash, and I haven't either found the right project for it when I'm thinking about, I really need to use that palette yarn, or, I'm just not When I come down here, I'm not seeing it because I have it hidden from myself. So yeah, even if you find an amazing deal on something, which I highly advise, that's the time when you do stash up on something, is once again, my threshold 60 to 75% off. I do highly recommend considering your storage and what is your accessibility to this yarn going to be as part of your personal process. So I know a lot of things came back to allowing yourself to mature into the craft. I know that this is one of those videos where there's just a ton of information being thrown at you. And a lot of it is my personal buying experience and my personal experience in building a stash over the last few years. So if you have any questions, please leave them down below. If you have personal tips for what works for you, please also leave those down below. Believe it or not, in my comment section, there are tons of people who actually read the comments to get information. So never hesitate. If you have something to add here on my channel, please add it. Please share your experience and knowledge too. This isn't just a place for me. It's a place for you as well. You guys take care. I love you, and I will see you guys real soon. Bye, guys.